Cubs might have struck out with Alex Bregman, but maybe the deal needed to make sense for them as much as it needed to make sense for Bregman. Now the Cubs can turn their attention to Dylan Cease. And what would it mean to add Cease to the Cubs starting rotation? And I know you're going to say, hey, it's a deep rotation now. But I'll tell you what, adding Cease would make the Cubs a legitimate World Series contender. I'm going to tell you why I think the Padres are about to make a move and how the Cubs can get involved. We're going to talk about that right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. Thank you guys for being on the show with me today. Let's get this party started. What do you say, everybody? Mick Gillespie, welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. And again, I can't tell you guys thank you enough. We had over 1 million views last year, and we're going to try to double that this year. And maybe there's a lot to talk about because part of what makes you want to watch is excitement around the Cubs, right? And so they didn't get Alex Bregman, and it's been, kind of a day to think about it. Red Sox signed him, 4-year deal. He's got opt-outs. $120 million. I don't think that the Cubs were afraid to spend the money. I think they would have went over the cap, or they would have tried to figure out a way to minimize that. But I feel like they were legitimately trying to sign him. But with his production slide and his age and the length of the contract, 4 years instead of 3, the fact that you got young players that you feel like are eventually going to be ready to play that position, it might not have made sense to give them, obviously a 3-year deal for that much money. And, maybe you felt like, hey, if you spread it out over 4 for the same amount of money, that was fair enough, and you didn't want to do it. So the Red Sox signed him for 3 years, and the Cubs come up short. Now, I don't know, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday's video, exactly what the move's going to be for the Cubs at third base, but I do know that for this team to get better and to get better fast, if they added an ace to the top of the rotation, that would get the job done, and that is Dylan Cease. And are they now focused on signing Dylan Cease? And I think the answer to that is maybe. I mean, this was hot, a couple weeks ago. The Padres, want to cut some payroll, but they also have to compete with the Dodgers in their own division, and that, that's tough. I mean, anytime you're taking on the Dodgers, that's a big deal. You're dealing with a team that's spending, $1 billion on their payroll, and they have some of the best players in the world. It's like an all-star team. But at the same time, the Padres have gone out and tried to match the Dodgers. They've been the closest team to contend with the Dodgers in that division, even over the Giants here lately. But what would it take for them to really put themselves in position to overcome the Dodgers, but at the same time be fiscally responsible? And I feel like maybe making a deal like this. So in the last couple days, they signed Nick Pivetta to a 4-year contract, and then they signed Kyle Hart to a deal. Both of these guys start. And why would you do something like that? You would do something like that if you were looking to flip one of your starters. And people have said, well, what about Michael King? His name's out there. He's not going to have the same value, though, that Dylan Cease would have. And if you remember, they got Dylan Cease from the White Sox, who got Dylan Cease from the Cubs. And Cease has been one of baseball's best starters, 57 and 46 and a 3.75 ERA in his 6-year career. And then twice in his career, 2022, and then last year, he won 14 games. And in this day and age of baseball, that's really good. 22, he had a 2.20 ERA, and then last year, 3.47, so, and he made 33 starts, so the guy's pitched a lot. He stays healthy. He's got a live arm, and you feel like he is on the verge of becoming one of baseball's best, really, ace pitchers. He already is, kind of, but I mean, like, I'm talking about like next level, one of those guys that you win a World Series with. And obviously that's what the Padres are hoping. He was second in Cy Young in 22, and then he was fourth in Cy Young last year, and twice, got votes for MVP. Now, what would it take for the Cubs to get him? Well, the Padres, they had to trade away some really good players, some prospects, to get the deal done a couple of years ago, knowing that it was a 2-year rental. Well, now if they're going to take advantage of the money part of it, get the Cubs to pick up the payroll, or whoever they trade him to could be Baltimore, that's on the cusp of a World Series with all that talent, but they haven't done anything in the postseason. The Mets would like to have him. Other teams are interested, and whoever makes the deal, right, probably going to have to pick up the salary, but then also send prospects their way, and that's how they could replenish their farm system. And at the same time, obviously they've got two guys that they can count on to start. And so I think it makes sense for them. And then, Craig Counsell, I threw this up on yesterday's show. I'm going to put it up here again. No, we're not done. I don't think you ever consider yourself done building a roster, whether big or small moves. I don't think you ever consider yourself done, especially February 11th. We're a few days away from that. I mean, it's Valentine's Day. So are you ready? I look at the Cubs rotation, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, I love Dylan Cease, slotted in between Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga. Lefty, righty, lefty. Boom, 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 right? And then you got Jameson Taillon, who I thought had a much better season last year than he did the year before. And then the other guy's Matthew Boyd. To me, I mean, I don't know how sold I am on Boyd, but he'd be the other guy. And then if you're the Cubs, you have depth, right? You got Colin Ray. You got Javier Assad, who I know is dealing with an oblique injury right now. You got Jordan Wicks. You got Ben Brown. You got Cade Horton in your minor leagues. And there's other guys there, that could start as well. Caleb Killian, Cody Poteet. I mean, so you got a host of other guys that give you a lot of depth as far as starting pitching goes. You keep those guys stretched out in AAA. And when it's inevitable that you get injuries, you got those guys to slide up there and make a move. For the Cubs to truly contend, win the division, right? Get over the 83 win plateau, which has been, their high water mark over the last couple of seasons. Win the division, which I think that the division right now is a lot tougher than some people are putting it. I think the Pirates are going to be better. I think the Reds are going to be better. I'm not sure about the Cardinals, and Milwaukee always seems to find a way to stay consistent. So for the Cubs to be able to win the division, they have to beat those teams. They didn't do it last year head to head. You're going to need great starting pitching. And when you throw that rotation out, when you put Dylan Cease in there, and then all of a sudden you start matching it against the Pirates, and of course they got Paul Skeens, and you look at the Reds and Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and the rest of those guys, and you're going, man, we actually, we have the ability, if those guys take a step up, to compete with them. And I think that's where when they grade these teams, they're not looking at going, hey, Paul Skeens did this last year. He's got the potential to be a 20-game winner. Hunter Green's one of my favorite prospect or, young pitchers in baseball. He reminds me of Nolan Ryan. So adding Cease, to me, puts the Cubs where you start stacking up that 1 through 5, and you're like, hey, man, this is a team that's going to give you trouble. I mean, you're going to have a tough time scoring against them in a 3-game series and a 4-game series, and the Cubs get that consistency that it takes to win. And I'll put it like this. Winning teams, to me, look the same. And the look to me is that when you win, you play consistent baseball throughout the entire season, right? And I felt like last year with the Cubs, there were too many games where they couldn't score. There were too many games where the bullpen blew games. There were too many games where, if they were in a close game, they couldn't keep the other team from scoring and vice versa. They just weren't consistent. This team's going to try to find consistency. It starts with, obviously, the 5 guys you give the ball to at the beginning of the game. So that's where we are right now. And the Cubs certainly have the prospects to get this deal done. But to me, what I wonder is what the Padres are expecting in return, and what would the Cubs be willing to give them that? Because if it means Owen Casey, I don't know if I'm doing that deal. I just don't. I think the guy's going to be an excellent player in the future. So anyway, you guys tell me what you think in the comments section. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. Again, thank you for being here, and go Cubs. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Unless something breaks, this deal gets done, hey, you'll see me.